You've all three of you mentioned in different ways the idea of capturing a personality in your work, or animating the spirit, as it says in one of your books, Paul. And it's something that's often discussed. How do you look to capture the essence of a sitter's personality? Is there a certain amount of getting to know each other at the very start, or is it the skill of an accomplished artist to capture that instantly? Perhaps each of you can comment. Paul?
Gosh, that's another big question. I was talking about it yesterday. It's, and I can put it, it's one of several ways, but one way is that I think if you're successful at bringing somebody's personality, spirit, soul, whatever you want to call it, onto the canvas, it requires a kind of sublimation of your own ego. So you kind of act as a kind of conduit or a sort of medium, where you allow that person to kind of come in and then come out. And you have to like free that process up so you don't kind of get in the way of it yourself.
Yeah. And Jessica, you mentioned some of the famous people that you've shot. Obviously you know a lot about them before, but then you kind of do you forget everything you know already when you go to meet them for the first time, so you can, as you said, find that thing that people don't know about?
I think that's the challenging part, really, because you don't want to go in with any preconceived ideas about them. But it is difficult. I think it's just, if you're genuinely interested in characters and people, it kind of works. I think you end up asking a lot of questions and you get to know them, and you get over that quite quickly, that sort of initial veneer that they have. I think it drops within, I'm sure you probably agree, in a very short period, and you sort of get to know the real character. But I think I prefer the longer you can have with them, the better. If it's very difficult, if you've got, if you've been given half an hour to take someone's picture, it's almost impossible, really, because you only get that show that they give you, that they're used to giving in that short time. So I think it's really the longer you can have, the better the shot becomes, or the better chance you have of capturing a personality.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, with a celebrity it's especially difficult, and one of Mick Jagger was like that. I had spent my whole life looking at him in one guise or another, and I had to say to him at the beginning that this cannot, I really have to stop thinking about what I know about you as Mick Jagger, the rock star, film star, everything else star, and just focus on you and me in the room together, and this small patch of air between us. That's all I'm looking at.
Agreed.
In the historical portraits that you showed, Liz, in your presentation, Elizabeth I was, as you say, glittering with the symbols of power. And I wondered, do we have to look closer at portraits now to find those symbols? Are they still there in contemporary portraiture, or have we kind of put those to one side to focus more on the individual and their personality now?
Well, you've just seen the new portrait that Paul has done. So, and we've all seen it. And, there is that sort of same heraldic device contained within the portrait. So I think it does exist. I mean, I don't really make many portraits of other people these days. I still do the odd self-portrait. But I think that what's interesting in portraiture really is that the artist can make a self-portrait because they are dealing with stuff that they know about. In my mind, the next sort of layer of portraiture that really works, and one can see the success of these works, are when the person is connected to the artist in some way or another. So the portrait of the lover, Paul, I was talking about some of the portraits he'd done of his family. There's some beautiful paintings of his, and indeed you showed a painting of one of your daughters. Yeah. And then I think comes the commissioned work, and I think these two are talking about the difficulties of making a relationship very quickly with somebody and then making an image of them. And I think that's really, I mean, I wouldn't want to do that at all, because I think it's really almost impossible. And I salute you for being able to do it. And I'm sure you both know when you've done something good and when it's not quite there, even though it looks like them, because actually to try and catch that magic is something that you can't really necessarily do with money, because it's a bit of magic. But then that's when you are an artist, you know. I think that's why so many people shy away from portraiture, because it's a really tricky thing to do very well. I mean, and you know, you've got masses of pretty mundane works here, if you'll excuse me. But within the range, there are some real crackers. And I defy anyone to disagree with me, because you will see them. You know, if you go down the bottom corridor, there's that Gerald Kelly painting. I think there's a real beauty, and it's a very straightforward painting, but there's definitely evidence there that there was something that happened between the artist, who's a very good artist in the 1950s, who was top of his game, but there has to be something that happens, like you said, with, you know, even with that unknown woman in the bush, because that's it's like a given, but you still have to have something going on there. So, you know, and symbolism, you know, that lady had her bunch of spinach or whatever she was going to have for supper. I mean, that grounded us in the knowing of what she was doing for her, you know, what she was about, if you like. So I think in that respect, quite often you get symbolism. Yeah. And you get it obviously or less obviously. And then, of course, there's all the hidden things as well that could be put in pictures. Exciting, you know, detective work to be done.
Great.
Yeah,
so I think we will open out to you. There's a couple of roving mics on each side. If we have any questions, if you can wait for a microphone so we can record it for the film. Does anyone have any questions to follow on from some of the themes we talked about this evening, or something completely different, something really mundane? What did you talk about in the studio while you're painting?
Hi, this is a question probably for Paul and Jane. My first thought in looking at Jane's outfit, the black and white stripes reminded me a lot of Carol Black's jacket, which in turn reminds me of the white doctor's coat. And I was wondering whether you'd looked back at previous presidential portraits from the Royal College of Physicians collection, and did that influence what you chose to wear, just as you happened to walk into Paul's studio, or how you thought about how you're going to approach the painting?
You want to go first? I didn't look at the collection before I started the painting. That might, I mean, I don't know whether it would affect me in a negative way, but I sort of try and come to these things fresh, so I can maybe give it a slightly different feel than the ones that are already in the collections.
And Jane, you're probably very familiar, obviously, with the collection here and the previous portraits that we have. And we have, in our archive, we have interviews with former presidents. And Carol Black said that she didn't think the Margaret Turner Warwick portrait quite did her justice, because she was wearing the full presidential gown, and she said that she almost looked swamped in the gown. But Carol Black was very happy with her portrait because she thought words like well placed in the chair, and she looked in control. Words like that, which I don't know if they come up in the first conversations with your sitters, or if you looked back at the collection, Jane, and thought, I want to look like that, or I definitely don't want to look like that.
Well, it's very difficult, because you know that the portrait is going to be hanging around for a long time. And I felt a sense of responsibility to reflect the office and reflect the role that I was doing. In terms of looking back over previous portraits, of course, there's only Margaret Turner Warwick and Carol, so there wasn't much choice, because there have only been 3 lady presidents of this college in 500 years. So it was a bit difficult. But what I didn't want to do was look like a man or look like the portraits that there were hanging on the walls. I wanted to look contemporary and as if I was looking for the future, particularly in view of the 500-year celebration.